So this year for ISM, I'm doing creative writing and specifically the novel writing field. Basically what I focused on is the elements of a novel and how one writes a novel, what they have to do to get published, what they have to do to make their novel successful. And I'm going to address these things today. A quote by Ben Franklin was, "Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing." I really put this to heart because when I write a book, or really anything for that matter, I want it to be something that will really share a legacy of myself, not just another piece of literature out in the market. I want it to be something unique to myself and something that people actually desire to read. Now, writing is a very simple in practice, but in actuality it's very difficult to comprehend and function. So the basics of novel writing is you need four basic things. You need a character, who's the people inside of your story and what the events of the story occur upon. The plot, which is the actual actions and events that the characters take. The setting, which is the environments in which your characters and your story take place in. And then your setting, which is, or your prose, which is the actual writer's style. Now, a novel needs to be very captivating to an audience. That's the only way you're really going to stand out from the other hundreds of thousands of books already out in the marketplace. In order to really make yourself stand out, you're going to have to highlight one of the four elements I just talked about: character, plot, setting, or prose. Mastering one of these concepts is already good enough, but if you can actually get all four in a single novel, that will just set you off to a really good start. Now, to write a novel, it takes a lot more time and dedication than one might think. You have to often research your specific area. For example, if I'm doing science fiction, I probably should have learned some relative physics for space if I'm talking about space travel, or else you might appear in a sense incorrect, as science fiction lets you kind of bend the laws, but it doesn't let you just recreate laws. For example, there's no sound in space, but yet a lot of movies such as Star Wars portray explosions in space. Now, the reason for this isn't the fact that they just ignored the physics laws. It's just the fact that audiences prefer to hear explosions, and likewise, some books can also do the same and make explosions or sounds and whatnot in places that wouldn't really occur. Now, fantasy is also another option. For example, they use a lot of magic and other theoretical concepts such as that, which often in our world obviously don't really exist in practical purposes, but for a writer's standpoint, you can pretty much make anything as long as it not only has a basic logical sense, but also actually appeals and has a purpose. Now, the first step to writing a novel is believe it or not, is actually writing it. A basic novel is around 50,000 words for the minimum novel, but most novels run around 70,000 or even 120,000 for adult novels. Now, you don't usually see books such as Stephen King's, which can run up to 200,000 words, because he's just a particular author himself and can kind of bend his own rules. Now, the average writer writes about 1,000 words per minute, or per hour, but it just depends on how fast of a writer you are. But if you do that basic math, I mean, it could take roughly at least 50 hours just to write out your first draft, and then that's without edits, without pretty much anything else, just the first draft of your work. Now, you could take that first draft and just go and send it to publishers if you want, if you think it's just a really great idea, but most authors, well, practically all authors are successful will at least edit it once, mainly just for mechanical and spelling errors, but also for plot inconsistencies and things like that. Because if you approach an editor with a story that is either illogical or just has holes that are blatantly obvious, no one's really going to take you seriously. Now, writers always change as they develop, and that's a really key concept to know. The writing field isn't really a stagnant field. It's not a field where you just kind of establish yourself and can hold it forever. Really what defines a successful author is the fact that they can change and learn to develop as they work. Like if you see an author, a very well-established author such as Stephen King, his works, believe it or not, have changed over the years, if you really look into them. Now, the basic concepts are the same, which is generally like the horror concepts, but he always applies new rhetoric and new different types of writing styles to really improve and expound on his already very experienced writing abilities. But now, after you actually write your novel, though, you have to edit it, of course, which is what we're discussing. Now, editing is a quite complex process if it needs to be, but you can often simplify it in very basic ways. Probably one of the easiest ways to edit, in my opinion, is to first read through your work and examine its plot and characters and settings and see how they interrelate with each other, which ones you need, which ones you don't, and cut out the ones you don't need. What this does is it not only shortens your work, which is generally preferred. If you can read a 50,000 word story and it gives you the exact same experience as a 200,000 word story, why not do 50,000? Because time is money. Now, when you edit, it's very crucial that you pay attention to these details because little tiny inconsistencies can easily detract a reader. Just like the whole space concept. If you just break a law of physics, people generally notice if they at least have a basic understanding of them. You shouldn't have a character just miraculously surviving 50-foot falls unless he's supposed to be a hero or just some specific reason for him to not take damage from that fall. Because a lot of authors, and especially action movies, you can see things like this happening almost all the time. Now, editing itself is actually, in my opinion as well, longer than the actual writing process. Because what happens when you write your first draft, you just simply get your ideas out on paper. But to really put that in a presentable fashion to your reader, you want to meticulously inspect every single detail of your work, from all the 4 elements to just the mechanics and the grammar of it. You want their novel to flow well while also being free of spelling errors and other such inconsistencies. And as a side note on that, editing, you can hire a professional editor, but for most, especially self-published authors, hiring a professional editor is just simply not an option because most run at least $1,000 and often to $2,000 depending on the size of your work. And most authors barely make that back, much less the other things you have to pay for if you're going down that route. Now, if you're going to a traditional publishing path, which I'll differentiate from self-publishing later, you have to write a query letter to literary agents. Basically what occurs is you write a letter, a sales pitch more like, of what your work is, your credentials, things like that, and just send it straight off to the literary agents, most of which live in New York. Now, this can take roughly 4 to 6 weeks for a response, and depending on how prominent the literary agent in question is, it could be even several months for that matter. And that's essentially all you have to do, though, if you're doing a traditional publishing. You query it out and then wait for the response. Now, more than likely, which I believe it's 99%, you will get rejected because that's just the way it is. They will receive often hundreds, if not thousands, of query letters a year, and they have to pick usually 1 or 2 out of that entire slush pile. And more often than not, they're usually accepting the ones that they've been working with before that are very prominent, like J.K. Rowling. Because when you know you have some big player like that, you don't have to worry about, oh, will this be a flop or a sale? Because when you have someone like that, it's always going to make money. It's just how much money is the question. But let's say for a theoretical example, you do get accepted into a big publisher or a big literary agent. What happens next? Your literary agent then goes out and basically represents you. They'll go talk to publishing companies that they know personally or just through their contacts, and they'll try showing your work to them and trying to throw like a little sales pitch for you. And basically, if they manage to get a deal with you, with a publishing company, they'll show you the contract, make sure you agree with it and everything that it entails, and then that's your decision whether or not you want to get published with that company or wait for even a possibly bigger fish. Now, even if you do get accepted into one of these big name publishers, marketing still relies heavily on you. Often they offer some very limited marketing for you, but for the most part, their job is just to literally get your book and publish it and distribute it to all their sales channels. To really make your book shine, you're going to have to talk to probably radio stations, TV hosts, all those sorts of things, trying to get yourself out to market and get yourself out in the public so that people can actually see you. And now, as I was saying before, there's a difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing. What I was just talking about was traditional publishing, where you go through a query and that whole literary agent process trying to get your book into a big major company such as HarperCollins or Penguin House Publishing. Now, the problem with these is it often takes a very long amount of time to get even a response back, whether that's a yes or no. And most of them have these exclusive agreements, which basically means if you send a query to one agent, you can't send it to another or multiple agents. And it's the same for publishing houses. Often they'll make your agent only apply there for X amount of time, and then once they say yes or no, then the agent can move on to another publishing company. And now what self-publishing is it's basically when an author uses a site or another channel, such as Amazon.com's CreateSpace affiliate. And basically what this is, it uses a print-on-demand feature, and what happens is you basically upload all of your templates and files of your work into the CreateSpace website. And basically what happens is it'll compile all those things for you, digitally make it for you online, and then show you what it looks like. Then you can order your own copies of it to make sure it looks good for print, and then basically approve it. And what CreateSpace does is it sends those books to your Amazon.com website. And what happens is if someone, say your friend wants to buy a book of yours and they order through Amazon, Amazon will tell CreateSpace that it has one copy one person is buying your book, so that CreateSpace will then tell one of its publishers to print out a book for you and then mail it to the person. So it has absolutely no cost to you. Amazon.com and CreateSpace handle everything for it. Now, obviously, this comes with some pricing and royalty drops, which is basically a royalty payment is what the author's paycheck is. And what happens is if you're self-publishing, you'll make actually pretty decent. You'll make probably 15 to 20% off of your book sales. But if you go through a traditional publishing route, their contracts will usually offer you about $100 to $2,000, but for each additional sale of your copy, they may only give you like 1 through 10 cents a book, which is kind of the trade-off. But when you look at it in the long run, if you do manage to get into a traditional publishing company, it almost always outweighs the cost of a self-publishing alternative, assuming though that you aren't an established author. Because if you were, for example, Stephen King, it might be more beneficial to simply market your own book and then keeps 20 to 30% of the profit instead of having to get a big lump sum of like $500,000 and getting 0.01% of the profit. And another beneficial thing about the self-publishing industry is that it's booming at the moment. With the new fluxes of internet and capabilities, a lot of authors now and also readers are flooding to the internet just to get ebooks and other alternative forms of now reading books, not only because it's cheaper, but just because it's more convenient. With people now reading on iPads, iPhones, Androids, their computers, it makes almost buying books obsolete. Well, not quite, obviously, as there's a lot of bookstores still around, but it's slowly, and quickly now, pushing into the book marketplace. And as I was saying, the ebook market is booming, but the one cost of that is that now a lot of very inexperienced authors are displaying their works on the web, and what happens is that as a whole it mars down the ebook business. Because what happens is, say a reader, for example, just tries out an ebook. They're like, oh, this looks nice, it's kind of decent, a good cover, looks like a good synopsis, I guess I'll pay $2 for it. I mean, it's not too much of an investment. Then they open the first page and there's already 6 typos on the first page. What will he do then? He probably won't buy another ebook. He'll be like, what is this? These are all amateur writers. They can't do anything. I'm just going to stick to my old traditional books. And that's the main problem with ebooks right now, is a lot of people are coming onto it and basically seeing these and then retracting back into the book marketplace because they don't think, well, what generally happens is people that are using ebooks can't really afford to get into traditional publishing, which is often the case, but if you can stand yourself out, it's not impossible to make a good living off of ebooks. For example, one very famous person at the moment is Hugh Howley, who wrote he wrote a science fiction series called The Warehouse. And it's basically like this, the Silo series, yeah, that's what it's called. The Silo series, which is basically a whole list of a group of science fiction novels in which a group of characters are trapped inside of a silo. And he basically went from absolutely nothing to a very highly ranked top seller on the Amazon bestsellers list. and he's been here for about 6 months by now. Now just one story, but it's not impossible, obviously, to make a living off of ebooks and to potentially even become famous, because now he's being approached by big names like Random House and Penguin Books, asking him for deals to market his book and put in a film and everything. And most of the information I'm learning so far this year has been from my mentor, Travis McNair, who's a creative writing teacher at our school and has a creative writing degree from UNT. And I got some information from Stacey Whaling, who's also an AP Lit teacher at my school, from Neil Schusterman, who's a very prominent young adult author at the moment, and David Haynes, who's an SMU professor in creative writing. There's a bunch more, but those are the big key figures. So far this year, my main achievements were I participated in the Scholastic Art and Writing Competition, which is a national competition for students all from grades 9 through 12, in which they submit works to regional competitions for competition. And basically you can send in categories of short stories, science fiction, and novels. And I sent in one short story and 2 poems, along with a novel which hasn't been graded yet. And so far I've won a silver key for both of my submissions, my poem submissions and my short story. Also, I did UIL Ready Writing this year, and I won first place in one of the district meets for Ready Writing. Now, a little thing I was working on this year was my guide to how to publish a novel in a nutshell, which is basically what I'm talking about right now. It's a very what's designed to be is a very short, blunt, straight to the point novel guide in which it tells young and probably mainly inexperienced writers who have no idea how novel writing works, in which I break down each and every individual section of how to write a novel, the marketing of a novel, how you publish a novel, the different options of publishing, and just a lot of different writing styles and how you can write your novel. Just a bunch of little details that most writers aren't very experienced with, and it's very difficult to really learn unless you've spent years studying it, which I have, which is why I'm compiling them all into this very short and concise work. Because often there will be guides that are 200, 300 pages, and it becomes almost redundant to have that because you're not really reading a guide as much as like a whole textbook on things, and by then you forget most of what you just read. This was also the last novel I worked on, and I published this last year. It was Condemned, and currently my ISM product is the sequel to this, which I've so far called Redemption. And I've learned a lot from between writing this work and writing Redemption. And this is an even older novel called Nightfall, which is the very first novel I wrote. Originally this was 108,000 words, which is about 4 times the size it is right now, which Condemned is only 70,000, so it's still almost 3 times as big. And basically, from these 2 novels, I had a huge jump in just writing knowledge because when I wrote this, I was in 8th grade. When I wrote this, I was in 11th grade. So I just had a bunch of advances, not only in just mechanics and grammar, but just really overall intellect and basics like that. But between writing this book and Redemption, which I don't have a copy of yet as it's not made, I've learned a lot of like really nitpicky things because I'm already a fairly advanced writer. I've learned a lot more towards the actual breaking down a sentence, how you make play on words and certain effects you can create by using alternative sentence structures, how like flipping a sentence will almost inverse the meaning even though it's the exact same sentence as if it was forward. There's just a lot of neat effects I learned from both Travis McNair and just a bunch of other sources, like mainly online articles, that I just did not know when I was writing this, and I really wish I knew them, but I'm still very proud of what I wrote in this book, and most of the feedback I've gotten for this book already has been well. And I know Redemption is going to be even better, so all I can hope for is it takes off even more. Now, a final word I want to mention about the novel writing industry is, like, a lot of people don't really understand that writing a novel isn't it. Like, in my guide, I really hit hard on how once you publish a novel, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road. You're not just going to get all these money pouring in, all these book deals and signings and film, people asking you to convert your book into a film. Really, it just depends how you market yourself. By then, it's not really even just a book anymore. It's actually a business. And your book is your product, and that's what you're trying to spread out. You want people not just to enjoy it, but you want them to tell their friends about it, to spread the word about it, and to get more and more people to read it. Because that's really the only way you're going to succeed. Probably the main goal, the main task I'd say for any new writer that just finished publishing a novel is to really work on making a website that they could direct people to and also provide links to where their novel is available. Get a lot of friends, family, and just people in general to review your novel, because reviews are probably the most crucial thing to sales. Because when you're on Amazon.com and you see a book with 2 reviews compared to a book with 10 reviews, you're going to trust the 10 reviews more. And then last but not least, I would also suggest getting like a little marketing kit. And I personally used Vistaprint, which is an online printing, digital printer, and I print out some business cards that I put links to my Facebook page so I could just hand it out to people whenever I meet them. I have a little poster right here. A little poster right here, which is used like when I'm selling at a stand or something, just to help gain attention. And just little things like that. It's the little things really marketing that help you succeed. And thank you for your time.